Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. Victims of Jeffrey Epstein criticised the US government after the release of heavily redacted case files with some documents and images blacked out or completely missing. The Justice Department says more records will be released, but survivors say the disclosures offer little transparency or new information. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announces a review of police and intelligence agencies after the Bondi Beach attack is declared a terrorist incident. 15 people are killed in the shooting at a Jewish festival, with police saying the gunmen were inspired by Islamic State ideology. The Kremlin denies that three-way talks between Russia, Ukraine and the United States are being prepared, despite diplomatic meetings in Miami. President Vladimir Putin's aide says proposals from Ukraine and Europe do not improve the chances of reaching a long-term peace. The French presidency says it welcomes Russian President Vladimir Putin's readiness to speak with President Emmanuel Macron. Paris says the terms and format of any talks will be decided in the coming days. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia is trying to cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea after intensified strikes on ports and energy sites. He says the attacks target Odessa and key trade routes as Moscow steps up drone and missile assaults. Israel's Security Cabinet approves the establishment of 19 new settlements in the occupied West Bank, according to an official statement. The decision brings the total number of settlements approved in the past 3 years to 69 and are seen as illegal under international law. The United States intercepts an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuelan international waters, a move that comes just days after US President Donald Trump announced a blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers entering and leaving the country. 9 people are killed and 10 wounded when gunmen opened fire at a licensed tavern in Birkestol near Johannesburg. Police say multiple suspects fled the scene and a manhunt is underway as investigators work to determine the motive. Now those are our top stories of the hour, but we head straight to Europe. And Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov has cast doubt on progress towards peace in Ukraine, saying changes proposed by European and Ukrainian negotiators to US peace ideas have not improved the chances of a long-term settlement. Ushakov has said that he was certain the revisions did not approve the document or the prospects for peace. His comments came as European and Ukrainian officials continue discussions on possible amendments to the US proposal. Meanwhile, US negotiators are to meet Russian officials in Florida, with President Vladimir Putin's envoy Kirill Dmitriev describing the talks with US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner as constructive. Joining us now is Keith Vaz, a former British minister, and he joins us live from London to discuss these developments in further detail. Okay, of course we are discussing the ongoing negotiations that are aiming to bring an end to the near 4-year conflict in Europe. Now we've had a statement from a special envoy, Ushakov, who says that these amendments made by the Europeans do not improve the prospects for peace. We're now joined by Keith Vaz. He's joining us live from London to discuss the developments of the day in a little bit further. Keith, we've seen the proposals from the Europeans, and Russia has said that it isn't happy with them. We've had Ukraine rule out their NATO prospects. We've had Europe ask for more European agency, stronger securities for Ukraine, financial support from decoupled asset politics, and explicit insistence on territorial integrity and self-defense rights for Kiev. Of course, we saw this US peace plan previously, many of whom experts said that it was leaning very much towards Moscow. Moscow, of course, reportedly holds the advantage on the battlefield. What exactly do you think Moscow cares the most about when it comes to ending this war? Is it territorial integrity, the stronger security guarantees for Ukraine, or something else?
Good morning, Thomas, from London. You're absolutely right. It is becoming a very complicated state of affairs. As your viewers will know, there was an agreement, a sort of an agreement made between the Americans and the Russians. That was the basis of a discussion with President Zelensky. Zelensky does what nobody else that I have seen in my 40 years in public life has done. He then starts a tour of the European capitals, is greeted with great affection and support, and the Europeans go out of their way to try and help Ukraine, which, of course, has the prospect of undermining the agreement that has been made between Russia and the United States of America. So we've now got a very complicated scenario where nobody knows exactly where they stand. And Europe is, of course, not being included in the talks between the Americans and the Russians. The loan that they've agreed, 90 billion this week, is their attempt to say, we will support Ukraine. But in answer to your question, what does he want most? I think it's always been land, hasn't it? Vladimir Putin wants to extend the boundaries of Russia. He wants to get back the Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine, and he wants border security. So I think the prospect of the Europeans ever invading Russia is so remote that it can't even be discussed. What we see from the Eastern European countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland even, is the fear that the Russians might move into their countries. So I think there is a basis of a settlement, but you need three people at the table. You need the Europeans, you need four people at the table. You need the United States, you need the Russians, you need Zelensky, and you need someone representing the European Union. Hopefully it won't be Ursula von der Leyen, who is not particularly respected, maybe someone like President Macron or even Keir Starmer. Somebody needs to be sitting at that table. This is a quad. It's no longer a triangle, and it's no longer a duo. It is a quad. And unless you have those four people and those four blocks in the room, you will never get a solution to this very complicated state of affairs.
And Keith, of course, we saw in the White House's national security strategy, which slammed Europe, of course, then labelling Russia as no longer a national security threat. We've also had an update today that US intelligence indicates that Putin's war aims in Ukraine are unchanged. Now, of course, the United States and particularly, of course, Donald Trump has ignored information coming out of US intelligence prior to this. Do you think there's any changing Donald Trump's mind, especially when it comes to European worries about Russia taking even more territory, of course, in Ukraine and maybe even spreading into Eastern Europe as well?
Who knows? Who knows where this will all lead? The complication is that you were clear under the Biden administration, which was very anti-Russia and anti-Vladimir Putin. As we know, President Trump has always been much more favorable. He likes strong men, not strong people. He likes strong men. And I would think that he regards Vladimir Putin as a very strong man. He does not regard Zelensky as a strong man because Zelensky would not be there without Russian money and European support. So that's the kind of person he wants to deal with. And he's a deal maker. Remember what he promised, Thomas, and I'm sure you reminded us on many occasions. I think he promised to do this either within 24 hours or within a month. I can't remember what it is, But on becoming president, he was going to sort out the Middle East and he was going to sort out the situation in Ukraine. It never happened. So we're going to start another year. Of course, Trump is completely, all over the place with the Epstein files coming out, with the other problems he has in America. This is not a way to conduct foreign policy. I was a Foreign Office minister for 2 years. Most of the work that we do is not on social media. It is sitting down the hard grind of deals and negotiations, which is, I think, what the Russians prefer. The man who brings, and it's unfortunately only men at the moment at the top table in Europe, apart from Ursula von der Leyen, the man who brings these 4 countries and blocs into the room, they will deserve the Nobel Prize for Peace, something that Donald Trump has always wanted. I would nominate him for the Nobel Prize for Peace if he got those 4 blocs in a room and said, we're locking the door, as every negotiator knows, we're locking the door till we have an agreement. Lives will be saved if that happens.
Keith Vaz, as always, it's a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining us here on the programme. We now move on and over to the Middle East, and Israel's Security Cabinet has approved 19 new settlements in the occupied West Bank. That brings the total approved in the past 3 years to 69, according to an official statement. The move was proposed by Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and Defence Minister Israel Katz. The Cabinet approved the plan to formally declare the new settlements in the West Bank in the last 24 hours, and Smotrich said the decision is meant to block the creation of a Palestinian state. He added that Israel will continue to build and expand settlements on what he called ancestral land. The announcement did not specify when the cabinet decision was taken. Okay, we're now moving on, and joining us to discuss this is Andrew Latham. He is an international affairs expert and he joins us live from Minneapolis in the United States. Of course, Andrew, these settlements in the occupied West Bank are seen as illegal under international law. We of course know that Bezalel Smotrich has made it a key objective of his to prevent any sort of Palestinian state being recognized. He famously said a few months ago that once approving some previous settlements, that they will have nothing left to recognize once these settlements are indeed built. What is letting Israel do this? Of course, we know that international law states that these settlements are illegal and are indeed in the Palestinian territories, but Israel seemingly undermining this. What more can you tell us?
The most important complicating factor which has rendered the two-state solution increasingly implausible, because the territory upon which the Palestinian state in that two-state scenario was meant to exist is increasingly non-existent because of Israeli settlements, which are illegal under international law. There's some case to be made otherwise, but the conventional wisdom across the globe is that those are illegal settlements. But there is a powerful constituency within Israel pushing for this on the basis of the ancestral lands argument. Judea and Samaria is where the Jewish people, as a people, were born. That is their historical territory. Therefore, they have a right to reclaim it after the Arab conquest back in the 7th and 8th centuries. There's another constituency in Israel which is pushing for this on national security grounds, that you can't have a secure Israel with an anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist dagger, as it were, pointed at the heart of the Jewish state. And then, of course, this political coalition of Benjamin Netanyahu's, those two factions are very, very well represented in pushing him in the direction of promoting the settlement process. Whether or not he believes in any of that it doesn't matter. It's politically expedient and necessary for him to support it. So that's why we see these developments unfolding as they are. I don't see any real break on this dynamic. The opposition in Israel is simply not strong enough to prevent this from happening. And in this respect, by the way, it's worth underscoring that the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, the occupied West Bank, whatever one wants to call it, is qualitatively different from Gaza. The Israelis, the Jewish people, have no historical, biblical, or ancestral claim to the Gaza Strip. They're willing to give that away if there are security guarantees, but the West Bank, that's qualitatively different.
Of course, the Israeli government see Donald Trump as, well, Benjamin Netanyahu called him the greatest friend to Israel in the White House that the country has ever had. But of course, these settlements continue to be illegal. But with a friend like the United States, does this prove consequences for Israel to face, difficult to press on the country for constructing these settlements? Have they faced any real consequences for continuing this?
Not from the United States, that's for sure. There have been signals and noises, but the Americans have treated this, Washington, and especially this administration, has treated this as a manageable issue rather than a deal breaker or something which is going to generate a rift, as it were, between Washington and Jerusalem. So there's that. I rather think that these moves will enrage the progressive factions, various factions in the United States, and they will, for other people, present another obstacle to their preferred option, which is the two-state solution, which, by the way, is supported neither by the Israeli population or the Palestinian population. Neither side really is interested in this two-state solution, but it remains an appealing fantasy in the minds of many progressives in Europe and in North America. But that is becoming increasingly distant, and I doubt very much that that Washington, the Trump administration in particular, is going to insist that these settlements be ended, dismantled. That's not going to happen, or even the expansion of the settlements is going to be slowed. I don't think that's going to happen. From Trump's perspective, as much as anybody can tell these things from a distance, this is simply not a deal breaker. It's another factor that has to be managed in a broader peace process.
Okay, Andrew, please stay with us as we move on to a related development. And representatives from the United States, Egypt, Qatar and Turkey have met in Florida's Miami to review the next steps of the Gaza ceasefire plan. According to a joint statement given by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, the first phase of the Gaza plan has seen good progress when it comes to expanding humanitarian aid in Gaza and the return of the seized hostage bodies to Israel. The statement also read that the ongoing discussions are now focused on implementing phase 2 of the Gaza plan, where they aim to set up a governing body in Gaza under a unified Gaza authority to maintain public order. According to Witkoff, their joint talks also included regional integration measures seeking cooperation on trade, energy, water and other resources. The participating parties also hinted at forming a board of peace which would act as a transitional administration unit to overlook civilian security and reconstruction efforts in Gaza. Further consultations are expected to take place in the coming weeks on advancing phase 2 of the Gaza peace plan. Andrew, is it the right time to be discussing the second phase? Of course, given the fact that there has been multiple violations on both sides. Of course, there remains one hostage body in Gaza, and of course, it seems that who will participate in this international governing force, they're struggling to reach an agreement on it.
Yes, it's high time. And anybody who's looked at any of these peace processes that are analogous, whether it's Northern Ireland or elsewhere, knows that the provisions, the ceasefire is important, the return of hostages is important, and the next two important moves really are governance and stability, peace and order, if you like. And that's going to require, if the Israeli army is to withdraw to the Yellow Line and then beyond, to evacuate Gaza altogether, and Hamas is not permitted to reestablish itself, or anything Hamas-like or Hamas-adjacent is allowed to emerge, one needs a stabilization force, an armed force that can impose and enforce law and order. And that needs to be a legitimate force and needs to be perceived by the international community, but especially by the Palestinian people and the Israelis, as legitimate. And so what does that force look like? Well, it's going to have to include a sizable Arab Muslim majority country component. It's going to have to involve Egypt because of Gaza. It borders it. Qatar has influence with Hamas. Turkey is a regional player and aspires to be a greater regional player. But they can't, in order to be legitimate, be perceived as being doing Israel's dirty work. So there has to be some buffering there as well. In a perfect world, one supposes there should be a European component, which would give cover to some of the Arab states, that it's not simply doing Israel's bidding. In terms of muscle, logistics, and leadership, there should be an American component there. So I think we can see perhaps not quite glacial movement, but slow and steady progress toward pulling together the various groupings, various states that need to contribute troops to enhance the peace process by enforcing peace, order, and stability in the Strip.
Andrew Latham, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the programme. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll of course continue to bring you all the updates coming out of those negotiations as soon as we get them. We now move on and over to the United States for our next story. And a sizable part of San Francisco was hit by a power outage, impacting over 125,000 residents in the California city of around 800,000 people. Pacific Gas and Electric companies say in a statement on X that power had been restored to around 90,000 households by 5 a.m. GMT, with the remaining 40,000 connections expected to be restored overnight. According to reports, parts of the city were blanketed in fog and many businesses were forced to close for the day at the height of the holiday shopping period, leaving normally bustling commercial areas quiet. TikTok has signed binding agreements to form a new U.S. joint venture. The deal involves Oracle, Silver Lake, and Abu Dhabi-based MGX. It allows the platform to keep operating in the United States as well. The agreement is set to close on January the 22nd. Half of the new company will be owned by the investor group, and ByteDance will remain a minority stake, with the rest held by its affiliates. The venture will have a majority American board. US user data will be stored locally under Oracle's control, and TikTok's algorithm will be retrained using US data. The move aims to address national security concerns and ends years of uncertainty for TikTok and its 170 million US users. Andrew joins us once again. Of course, Andrew, there was huge concerns, particularly by the Trump administration, that TikTok and its Chinese owners would cause a national security threat in the United States. How much of a big development is this, and what more can you tell us about these companies like Oracle and so on that are taking on this new US-owned TikTok?
Well, if it all comes to pass, it's quite an important development. There are legitimate security concerns, not just privacy and data concerns, but security concerns about, in a big sense, about the ability of the Chinese Communist Party to shape the political discourse in the United States, especially amongst an impressionable youth population. And then there were the privacy and data considerations as well. And so it's not surprising. What's surprising is it took the United States this long to actually act, the United States government. And now, though, we have what seems to be a working compromise. TikTok, in some way, shape, or form, continues to operate, continues to provide a service which is in demand, 170 plus million users in the United States. It's a non-trivial economic asset. But the national security concerns are being addressed as well. So it seems to be one of those unlikely things in international politics where it's a win-win. Oracle wins, the US government wins, and ByteDance wins, and the American consumer wins. The only loser in all of this is the Chinese Communist Party, and I'd consider that to be a win anyway.
Andrew Latham, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.